So I hire a person and they're really good at their job. I definitely don't want to be wrong about the fact that they're terrible for the culture of our company. So
Yeah.
I can very easily fall back on, no. It's everybody else's the problem, right? It's not this one individual. It's the other 13 people are the problem, right?
Right.
Because this one individual I hired is hitting all their numbers, right? Or is doing their trade or their service very, very well. And especially if you start to get into more selective roles where that skill set is even harder to find. I know there's organizations I've been at where, I've lived that situation of having what I would deem a wrong person in the right seat, and the more specialized that person is, or the more qualified they are at the actual skill set for that job, the harder it is to make that change.
It's also interesting, I've noticed, is that the more senior that person is, the more forgiving you are of their output as well.
Yes.
That's a bigger mistake to have to admit to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot too.
Interesting.
There was a phrase used in the past, the 10Xer, who comes in and is the genius, and they get a pass for so much. They get forgiven by laterally or above for behavior that could be considered toxic, only because they're the 10Xer. Lack of accountability for the impact that their character has on the productivity of everyone around them is overlooked. And yes, you're right.
Josh and I talk a lot about hero culture and organizations that enable and grow heroes, and that it's really bad for everybody, right? It's bad for the organization, because all of a sudden you have these individuals who, by the way, aren't necessarily heroes, aren't always bad cultural fits. Some people can be amazing culture fits and they're still in this situation.
Sure.
But all of the knowledge is in one person. Nobody else is keeping up. They're not really sure what's going on, and that one person can very easily burn out. And when they eventually decide they need to go, or if they are a bad culture fit and everybody realizes they need to go, a whole chunk of the company's productivity goes with them. So there's a bigger problem here.
100%, and we even see it. We see it a lot of time with owners, right? At least in the EOS world. So a lot of the people that I have conversations with, around talking about mutual clients are exit planners, right? So if you look at that company size, I'm talking about 10 to 250 employees. A lot of times, the owner, right, the person who started that, they're a person of some financial means, but in a lot of cases, their company is their most valuable asset. Right. And there's this idea of, I'm going to hit a certain age and I'm going to sell the company, and I know that it's worth this much money, and then that's how I'm going to creep into my retirement. And what they don't realize is without them, the company it's worth a fraction of that. And so we have these people that have these very skewed valuations in their head of what their company is worth, because so much of it is tied up with them. And that's not in a malicious way, and that's not a bad culture type thing. But that's, again, where you're getting to. The bigger problem there is, okay, how do we get that knowledge out of your head and we actually get that worked into the company itself, right? Into the design of the company, the designs of the seats, the types of rules we have here, and then we can educate the right people on those rules and functions.
Thinking about culture and underlying beliefs, what do you feel are the ones that lead to these situations where being a single point of failure is desired, incentivized, rewarded in an organization, where you have to, I'm assuming the way you undo that involves having to work them through a different way of thinking as well, or challenge surface underlying core beliefs about themselves in relation to the business that is engendering this need to be a single point of failure.
Sure. So I think what lends to a lot of that mentality of people trying to be heroes sometimes is a lack of definition of accountability throughout an organization, right? Okay. So, and this might not be what you're asking me, and if it's not, let me know. But as an example, a long time ago in my career, I was in a technology company, and I was in the customer success team, and there was a culture where if a client sent an email, right, at 10:30 at night or 11 o'clock at night, it was almost a race amongst our internal team, right, of the 3 or 4 people who got that email, of like who's going to respond first, right? Who is more proactive and going to, right? Who's going to respond at 11:15 at night and not 7 a.m. or not 8:30 a.m. And because when an email got sent to a team, right, and there were different levels of people on this, I don't think it was very clearly defined of, okay, here's the person who is accountable and responsible for communication with the client, right? Or here's who's responsible and accountable for doing, even if we would say like after hours communication with the client. And so, it was almost like a scarcity mindset of like, well, I better be the first one to respond, because who knows who's looking, or, whether if it's the client sees that I'm the first to respond, or if somebody in management comes to find that I'm the first one to respond. And so I think more when you have very clear defined roles and accountability, right? So we're a big proponent of EOS. We always say, if 2 people are accountable for something, nobody's accountable for it.
Mm-hmm.
So part of what we do, and one of the tools we use is called the accountability chart, which is kind of it's like an org chart on steroids almost. But what we do more so within that is we actually define the 5 roles, ROLES. That's, my wife gives me a hard time about my Western PA accent. So not RULES, but ROLES roles, for every single seat in the organization, right? So that you clearly know who's responsible for what. And then if I'm responsible for it, then I can trust myself to know the best way to handle or react to that. There's not this culture bred where I have to go outside of what might be appropriate or what might be the norm, because I'm afraid of some kind of unforeseen competition within my own team.